I tell everybody, that I come into contact with, be yourself, be genuine. People can smell a rat. Customers can smell a rat. They know when you're faking it or when you're not listening to them and you're not really interested in them or trying to help them. They'll know it and they'll go find somebody who is. So I think that is paramount. I think that's the most important thing, is to just be yourself.
Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast, where we explore the seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that we work and the way that we live. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Johnston. Super excited to be with you all today because we get to have a beautiful chat with one of my college roommates, Jim Logger, who has just done so well in his career. He's an executive with Penske Trucks. And let me tell you, I knew him when we were drinking beer in Auburn, Alabama. Welcome, Jim Logger.
Michelle, it's great to see you as always. And you always bring that energy. That hadn't changed in 35 plus years. And we did drink a little beer, which is not a bad thing.
We drank a lot of beer. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's okay.
One of my best memories for you all, because you all know that this podcast is hosted in New Orleans, Louisiana. Mm-hmm. You know that's where I'm based, and it's one of my favorite cities in the world. I chose it for the people, for the soul, for the joie de vivre. And one of my favorite memories is with Jim Logger at Jazz Fest.
Yeah, that was a great trip. And I grew up, as you know, about 2 hours east of there along the Alabama coast. So loved coming over to New Orleans, probably coming over there long before I should have in high school with friends and certainly during college. But then, yes, that Jazz Fest was incredible. Great time, a lot of great music and food and friends, and it was just an excellent trip.
I attribute the fact, because Jim ended up marrying my college roommate, Jackie Nelson, who's now Jackie Logger. And and so she was with us at this Jazz Fest, the first time I ever went to Jazz Fest. And I attribute it to Jim Logger. Seriously, why I'm in New Orleans, because I fell in love with New Orleans on that trip. I remember walking out of Jazz Fest, Jim, and we had taken a picture because the four of us had just spent our last dollar bill. And so we took a picture of our last dollar bill, and we're walking out as the gates are closing, and we're literally dancing in the streets. Yep. Do you remember?
I remember it well. It was fantastic. And, that proves you don't have to have a lot of dollars to have a good time. And we
were broke.
We were broke. And fortunately not as broke today as I was then. But boy, that was such a good time. I do remember that vividly well. And just a great time. And, I know we're going to talk about connections here, and I'm a deep believer in connections. And, you connected me with my wife, my family, as a result of this connection that you and I made, and you're still, great friends with her, and it's kind of the rest is history, as they say, from there. So from dancing our way out of the Jazz Fest to here we are today.
Gosh, you're so right. It was one of those things. I lived in a house full of girls at Auburn, and Jim was in this, cool fraternity, and he was over at the house. And I remember looking at him and saying, "You need to date my roommate." And voila, how cool is that? You're right. And I also remember, is for those of you who are, because we're trying to figure out like connection, we're trying to figure out successful leadership, we're trying to figure out, for those of you tuning in, how do you get to the top? Jim is an executive at Penske Trucks. That is a massive company. He's sitting right now in their headquarters city in Pennsylvania, like shivering. It's so cold.
Yeah, I wish I was in New Orleans today. It's been a long, cold winter up here.
And I can remember, I talk a lot about this in my MBA class that I teach. Like, think about if I were to interview your sweet mom, think about what she would, or your sister, think about what she would say, how you came out of the womb. And I think Jim Logger came out of the womb with serious high EQ, emotional intelligence, your ability to connect. You've always been a really great people person.
Well, thank you for saying that, and right back at you. And by the way, congratulations on all of your success, Michelle. It was never in doubt. I mean, from the time I met you, there was no doubt where you were headed, and that's great. And congratulations. And my mom, who was just a fantastic person, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but I am who I am because of her. And I I don't know that that EQ came at birth, but she put it in me, I think. And we had hardships. My father died when I was 6 years old, so we were, that was a tough time. But it didn't feel like a dark time, and that was because of her. It was just you just forged on. You went on with life, and she went back to work, and she raised us, and we all worked. We all had to kind of dig in and help each other, and that was where I think I came to appreciate connection, because we needed a lot of help, and we connected with people that helped us and family, and just kind of worked our way out from there. But she was an incredible person, and I think I grew up with a lot of empathy, with a lot of humbleness. That was a humbling event for sure, and a work ethic. And she grew up on a farm there in South Alabama, and to me, my life has all been about connection and working, and those two, are interlinked, and connection happens certainly at work and with family and friends, and it's just a constant flow of that, and I think that's basically what we're here to do, is to connect with people, to help people, and to work. I get a great deal of satisfaction out of work. You knew me as a student. I was not a great student. I enjoyed working a whole lot more than I enjoyed sitting in class and learning. But I love to learn. I just didn't love to learn in that format. But
Gosh, you're so right. If I were to remember again, going back to our years at Auburn University, here's what I remember about you. You got along with everybody. Didn't matter if they were in your fraternity, if they were in your major, you got along with everybody. You could find commonality with everybody. You were super humble, for sure. And you were a really great listener. I remember, and you would ask questions. And back then, guys, let's be honest, you have a son. I don't have a son, but I teach lots of college students. The frontal lobe doesn't necessarily, meld until later on. And you were a 20-year-old kid who was really, really good at asking questions and listening. And you were empathetic. And you're right. I don't think back then I realized that your father had died when you were 6 years old. I knew you were raised by mom, and now this all makes sense.
Yeah, and I've just always been fascinated by people's stories, and I still am. And see, I'm going to disagree with one aspect of that. I've never felt like that I've been naturally good at that. I always feel like I kind of have to make myself go there. So I like to talk about myself, and I think most people do. And but I've learned, especially in this business, and in on the revenue generation front, the sales front of it, it's about connection, and it's about getting people to open up and talk to you. I always tell our folks, people will tell you, customers will tell you everything you need to know if you ask good open-ended questions and you let them talk and you listen and you play it back. So I'd like to think that maybe that was there back then, and I appreciate the compliment. But I have just truly always been fascinated by people and their stories, because out of how many people on the planet, 7 billion people, there are no two stories alike. And I just think there's so much to learn from all of that. And frankly, it's just interesting to me to hear people's stories, and then to see where those stories can take you and where those connections take you.
Gosh, thank you. I feel so validated. When I first was a young professor, one of the first papers that I published was on listening, the importance of listening skills in the sales arena. And it was hard to get people back then, Jim. I'll be honest with you. It was hard to get people in business to really focus on listening, because so much back then was on talking. And back then it was very much the jerk boss and command and control, and you had to walk in and like wow the room, and you were the center of gravity and the center of attention. And I feel like finally we've turned a corner where the best leaders are the best listeners. The best leaders ask the best questions. The best leaders are servant oriented and make it about others. So it's no wonder you're an executive for a humongous company. So I wanted to give the listeners kind of who is Jim Logger from my eyes, and he's the only friend that I've ever interviewed on here, like a friend from college, and I chose Jim because of his beautiful gifts, and because I think that you all could really see how focusing on other people's stories, and you're right, 7 billion people, there's no two stories are alike. and finding that commonality and connection will get you to the very top. You almost have to like put your ego aside, because Jim said something that is absolutely accurate. Most people really love talking about themselves,
That's absolutely
right?
true.
So
And,
share with us, share.
I feel, fortunate again for all of these people along the way that kind of helped form me, if you will. And I, we work for Roger Penske, still very active in our business. He's just an incredible person, human being, business leader, everything, the most successful sports franchise in world history. And, but, he has these very kind of simple foundational things, and he'll say, and he has over the years, we have a big company, but we don't have any big shots. And, it's those little things like that that really kind of, I think, punch you and wake you up. And so that brings, that's saying, let the ego get in the way. Don't, and I came up when we started in this business in the early 90s, it was very much command and control was still kind of the way of the world. And so, you can learn things from those kind of bosses too. It's more like how you don't want to be or how you don't want to be treated. And frankly, it just doesn't work anymore. I mean, the business environment has evolved so much. People are different today. If you tried that today, it's going nowhere fast. You wouldn't have anybody working for you, anybody worth having working for you here. And so, I think people today, young people, want to be collaborated with. They want to, they want to tell their story. They want to bring their perspective, and that's what we need, frankly. I mean, again, I can't do what I do without all of that going on throughout the organization every day. These connections, talking to prospects, talking to customers. I try to, it gets harder and harder. As I'm sitting up here, like you said, in cold and snowy Pennsylvania today. We've got thousands of locations, tens of thousands of people, and you can lose connection pretty quickly. So that's a challenge for me, is how do you stay connected to the real world, to the customers, to the people? And there's no substitute for it. I mean, technology is great and it allows for things like this, but you have to have conversations. And so I try to do as much of that as possible. Get out, talk to people, talk to customers, listen to what's going on. What do they need help with? We're problem solvers, but we can't solve the problem if we don't know what it is. So we have to connect and hear that to do what we do.
Gosh, there were so many great nuggets in just what you shared. So let's go back. It is fascinating to me, Jim, that whole kind of jerk boss was very much in vogue when you and I were first starting. And I know you and I also, we were like, aye, aye, sir. And most of them were sirs. You're like, okay, you say jump, I say how high, like, okay. And I don't, what do you think has changed? Because I agree with you, you're not going to be able to attract and retain and engage the younger workers if you're a freaking jerk boss. We both know that. But what exactly has changed? How come? Because a lot of leaders will say to me, well, that's how my boss was, so that's how I'm going to be, and it worked then. Why can't it work now? What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, well, times have changed, and people have access to information, and they know there are other opportunities out there. And they know there are companies not being run by jerk bosses, and they'll go find that opportunity. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just there's some. I go back to when I got my first job. Talk about a connection. This was a high school friend's ex-girlfriend who called me because there were no cell phones. I don't know how she found me, probably through my mom, but called and said, I'm leaving this job. I'm moving to New York. I think you would really like this industry and this company. Here's my boss and here's his number. And that's literally how I got this job. You either looked in the newspaper.
No way.
Yeah, you looked in the newspaper or somebody referred you. And so, I guess at the time we just didn't have access to all the information or be able to have the mobility that we have today. But again, it's a different time now. And I think young people have different expectations and different goals. I don't think they're any less ambitious, but it's a different kind of ambitious. They're motivated by different things. And I think they probably have a better balance than we did at that age. It took me a long time to get there, but I think they kind of come with that to say, yeah, I want to work hard for a good company and I want to succeed and I want to move up. But I also like to be involved in the community. I like my weekends. I like my friend, whatever that is. They kind of come with that now. So I think, we have to be in tune with that to complete the whole picture, I guess you could say, for people.
You are so right. One of my favorite researchers and speakers, Brene Brown. and she was talking to a bunch of Gen Xers, which is what you and I are. And she said, I am so tired of you all complaining about the Gen Zers not wanting to work because guess what? You raised them.
It's so true. So
That
true.
is so true. We're talking about our kids, and they are different. My daughter is amazing. Love her. She doesn't want to be like me. She doesn't work. And it's not that she doesn't want to work hard. She doesn't want to work like I did at all costs, just grind and grind and grind and grind, and right? And so I wrote about her in the book that you so sweetly bought. And there was a chapter when she said, I've been home for 2 weeks, Mom, for Christmas, and I've barely seen you. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's what we're talking about. They don't want to do what we did at all.
That's right. And I don't blame them in some respect. And I'll tell you this, and I've honestly, and we hire great people. I think we're very fortunate. And it's it doesn't just happen. It's because we try to keep a very flat organization and try to stay connected with everybody throughout and kind of open up channels, not just north and south, but east and west, where people know. And again, this was an early experience of mine. I was looking got a promotion, and I was talking to this hiring manager who was a senior vice president at the time. And he said, if you can't get your boss, call me. If you can't get me, call Roger Penske. If you got a situation where a customer needs something, an associate needs something, yes, we have a hierarchy, and you need to understand and respect that. But when it comes to that, get whoever you need on the phone and get it solved. And so I think I've been fortunate working in a place like that. And so I think we hire people that kind of fit into that mold. And I don't see a lack of earnestness or hard work ethic or any of that. It's there. It's just different. It's different than what it was for me and what it was for you, but it's no less. That's for sure. I just think it's different.
I think you're absolutely right. And when I spoke about my tremendous amount of makeup that I have on my face today, it's because I was on a news program and they wanted to know, how do you connect during virtual meetings? And so you and I both love face to face, right? We're extroverted. We like, and there is absolutely hardcore research that shows that our body reacts more positively in a face to face situation. We feel more creative. It's less transactional. Once you feel more connected with the other person, then you are more motivated. Okay. So you must be on a lot of Zoom calls, I would imagine.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you connect with your people on these virtual calls?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so let's go back to that COVID era, because we weren't doing a whole lot of this prior to that. And then we had to very quickly learn how to do it. And so I went from, not having done it much to doing it a lot. And that felt good. And then it felt not so good again, because I wanted real human connection, and I still prefer that. But then, the ebb and flows, and now, this is a useful tool, and I think it's a great technology. And so, I agree with you. Face to face helps a lot, and this is better than in some sorts of situations, better than a phone call, certainly better than an email. So I just kind of try to put it in its proper place and use it when it's better than those some things, but not use it when it's not as good as something else. And so I think, again, that COVID era about killed me. And I think a lot of people, who thought, oh, this will be great, I can work from home and I can have my slippers on or whatever, very much missed that human interaction in the office. And so, it's a blend now. I'm not back this has freed me up to travel and still have meetings like this and do things like this, which is great. So it didn't tie me down. But again, it's got to have its proper place. And I think that's true of really all technology. And I think this is a danger and something that I've worried about over the years that you talk about a seismic shift. I mean, I started out in an analog world. Trucks didn't have computers on them. There's no technology on them. I didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have a cell phone when we started out. I think a pager came pretty quickly, which seemed pretty exciting at the time. And, now you could stop and use a payphone and call somebody. So that was kind of the world we started in, the working world. And then now the technology is just coming so fast. And now with AI, all these things. And so I do worry about connection. I worry about human connection in this. And so I spend a lot of time trying to understand where can this technology help us, because we got to use it, we got to leverage it, it's a way we communicate a lot of times with customers now, or present value, show value to them, but it can't replace the connection. And so that's the thing I work on a lot with our people. Say, okay, where does this fit in? Where can you use it to do more, to be more efficient, be more productive? But don't ever forget, you got to sit across the table from that customer and have that conversation. You got to build a relationship. You got to build some trust. And I know that's what runs our business. I think it runs most businesses out there, because if we don't have associates, customers, and suppliers, all three of those things, and they're pretty much equal level, because you don't have a business without one of them. And all of those three things really take connection, and connection at a high level, and connection done well.
Gosh, you're so right. These nuggets are fantastic, Jim. I like how, because I would imagine you mentor a lot and train, like, as an executive, spend a lot of time with some of your new hires, as much as you can, I'm sure, trying to show them and model the way. And here's the Penske way, and here's what we expect. And I love how you just framed how let's utilize these technologies, but let's put them in their right place and use them for the right thing, and not get over reliant. Because that's what I'm hearing with virtual meetings is, for some companies, particularly the remote companies, that's all they do now. And some of the leaders that I coach, they say, Michelle, I am empty at the end of the day. Zoom zombie is real. I'm totally depleted and empty. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to research this, and tell me what you think. I think, this is my quote, that productivity without connection equals emptiness. So you can go all day in these transactional meetings. Okay, yeah, what do we need to get done? Next one. And unless you're really having any sort of connection face to face, by the end of the day, you're totally depleted. Because as humans, we need connection. We are wired for connection.
Absolutely right. And, again, I'll go back to this kind of experience coming through COVID, or in that period. Again, it felt great. All of a sudden your calendar's loaded up with all these meetings. And then it started to be like, okay, literally not a break in between, no time to regroup, to think. And I think we really overused the tool. And I think this is true of scheduling or calendars, whether it's a virtual meeting like this, or regular meetings. I could be going down the hall and having a meeting. I mean, you need time to think, you need time to regroup. And I think the other thing that these virtual meetings did is, they just pop on your calendar in an hour. So let's meet for an hour. And me, my attention span's pretty short. An hour is a long time for me on a one topic or one session. And so I worked with a coach who was fantastic. One of the best things I ever did, executive coach. And I didn't know what to expect going into that, but, I start laying out some of the things I struggle with. And I said, I feel like I don't give the proper attention to people or these meeting topics sometimes. I feel like I just, I'm all in for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I kind of start checking out, especially this form, because I can have my phone right now looking at it and you wouldn't know the difference. And so that was happening a lot. And I thought he was going to give me some technique to stay interested or engaged. He said, well, when you get on in the meeting with him, tell him you got 10 or 15 minutes, and to put whatever it is in the first 10 or 15 minutes, because you're out. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. And so, and this was just, a few short years ago, but I really started kind of handling my calendar that way. And so I don't accept everything that comes on. I don't accept an hour if I don't have an hour, or if I don't think it deserves an hour, that it's a topic that, and so I think because of this technology, because of the fast pace, and we're all busy, extremely busy, you have to own that calendar and that schedule, and both for work and personal life. And Jackie and I, my wife and I, share calendars. We wouldn't have gotten through raising 3 kids if we hadn't, because it's the only way I could kind of know with my travel schedule and what all was going on, where I needed to be for them. And again, that's an equal part to this. You got to have that balance. And so, I think technology is great, but it doesn't take the place of these connections. You got to find time to do that, and you got to spread that around, I guess I would say, and try to. And you said something about mentoring. As my hair went from brown to gray, my outlook on things changed, on the company and what I do. And, I see one of my real major roles right now is to try to share, with the younger people coming up, young leaders, young managers. I get in front of as many of them as we can. And, we went to a lot of training virtually coming through COVID. And we thought, well, this is pretty nice. We're not flying people in. We're not, saving millions of dollars not doing this. But about 2.5, 3 years ago, we realized, something was missing from that. And so we put that, well, it's a combination now, it's a mix. So, but we looked at these, say, which are the most important ones to get people in a room together so that they can meet each other, meet their peers, so they can have these conversations and we can meet them and we can spend time with them. And so we did that. And I try my hardest not to ever miss one of those. And we hire about 750 young people in my part of the business coming in, what we call management trainees. These are young people right out of college. And I love those sessions. I love the energy that comes. They have great questions. They are so much more mature than we were at the time. They're exposed to so much more, and they want to grow. They want to learn, and they want your perspective. And it's just an awesome way to connect with people. And I get really charged up when we have those people in.
A couple of things I really want to for the listeners to understand. Jim said some really shared some cool insights. I do think we're at an inflection point with these virtual meetings where you're right. I think we went gun ho, like, whoa, this is amazing. And then we said, whoa, this doesn't work for every type of meeting. And I shouldn't be in back-to-back meetings all day long because I don't have time to think or do my job. I don't feel as good. Maybe the meetings need to be in person, the certain meetings. So I do think we're at an inflection point. So I want to encourage all of you all listening to really own your calendars, what Jim is saying, own your calendars and say, if an hour doesn't work, there's no reason, if you're in charge of the meeting, if you can have some influence, roll it back and say, I want 15, 20 minutes. I need to block my calendar so I have time to strategically think. I have time to answer emails. I have time to prep for these meetings. So I do think we need to reel it back a little bit, a lot probably, and take back ownership of our calendar. And I want to end with, I would love to know, Jim, really kind of speak to our audience. Most people who are tuning in are mid-level managers and high performers, and they want to get promoted. So share with us the seismic shifts that you're seeing right now working for Penske, and then any 2 or 3 pieces of advice or just one big piece of advice you have for our listeners.
Yeah. So, again, I'll lean into this technology piece. It's really changing everything. And again, I'm sure this is happening in most businesses. Maybe ours wasn't as technologically advanced as some others, but it is now. It's coming, and there's so much we can do with it. And so harnessing it and then leveraging it to do good for customers is the focus. But again, I can't stress enough, we are a relationship business and industry, and we have to never take the focus off of that and the focus off of the customer. So it's got to be used as a tool and not become, the primary thing. So I would say just be careful with it and use it accordingly. And in terms of advice, I've been kicked around a lot over 35 years, and I think being authentic is absolutely paramount. And, I was a young manager, young leader in my late 20s, and I got a bit of that boss syndrome. I was promoted, moved into a location. I knew nothing about the location. I knew nothing about the people or anything. And I kind of went in there, with, hey, I'm the boss. And I did that for about, 60 days, 90 days. And I had this really gruff old ex-Marine or Marine, there are no ex-Marines, this Marine service manager who sat me down one day. He shut the door and he said, listen, he goes, you're not fooling anybody but yourself. He goes, we know you don't know anything. We know, and I mean, it was a 2x4 in the face, and he was right. And so I walked out the door and I started over. I went and I sat down with everybody in that district location and said, tell me about your market. Tell me about your customers. Tell me about your struggles. Tell me about you personally. Tell me about your family, and just kind of built back up from there. And it was probably, if there was a seismic shift along the way, that was the first one. It was like, I was going nowhere in terms of either getting myself promoted or getting the company, or any of it. I was helping nobody by the way I was operating. And when I took it back down a notch and started, collaborating, working with people, everything changed, and I saw the light early on, fortunately. So, and what I found was, that other person wasn't really me. I was trying to be the last person who I'd replaced or somebody else that I was not. And so that's the one thing. And I tell everybody that I come into contact with, be yourself, be genuine. People can smell a rat. Customers can smell a rat. They know when you're faking it or when you're not listening to them and you're not really interested in them or trying to help them. They'll know it and they'll go find somebody who is. So I think that is paramount. I think that's the most important thing, is to just be yourself. And it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I've only been here a year. I've only been in this job a month, but I'll go get you an answer. And then I always say, make sure you get them the answer. Don't fail to follow up. Say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get you an answer and I'll get back to you. And that's, it's pretty simple. Honestly, it's very simple. But a lot of people just blow by it, but, by either trying to be something else or do something else. Kind of focus on that, being authentic. It's the old golden rule that we grew up with. How would you want to be treated? And so I always try to, in any of these interactions, and what makes you feel good. It makes you feel good when somebody is interested in you, ask about you, wants to hear about your day, or how you became so successful. And so, that's and people are, all the same across the board. Customers are they're people. They're just people. So talk to them, ask good questions, listen to them, be earnest and authentic, and I think the rest just kind of comes as a result of that.
Oh my gosh, you were such an amazing guest, Jim Logger. That was, I tell you what, Jackie was right. To our listeners, we met up in the fall. I hadn't been back to an Auburn football game in 20 years. And I got to see Jackie and Jim, and we were having a beer. There was a band. And Jackie said to me, Jim's really, really good at this stuff. I said, really? She said, he would be a great guest on your podcast. So I have Jackie to thank.
Okay. Well, I wondered about that.
She was right, and you were phenomenal. So thank you all to the listeners of the Seismic Shift podcast for tuning in. You heard from Jim Logger, an executive with Penske, all about connection and listening and servant leadership and how to deal with all of this technology and putting it into perspective. And he gave us so many great nuggets. Thank you again, Jim Logger. And thank you to Loyola University New Orleans for your incredible sponsorship. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University New Orleans for helping bring this content to life.